Hey guys, welcome back to A2 Audio. Today on the channel we're going to be talking about the Sencore SG165s, and specifically we're going to talk about how we can't find probes for them. And so every time I buy these, the original probes that came with them are missing. And so you figure over 40 years the small parts go missing, and so there's not a lot of options really to replace those probes. There's one gentleman I found on eBay that actually manufactures a version and makes his own probes and sells them, and they work. However, I think there's a couple things we can do to make them better. And so I'm going to throw a picture up on the screen above and show you what the inside of those probes look like. And so when I opened it up and I saw that, it didn't really give me a lot of confidence that it would last a long time or about the build quality. And so electrically it's fine and it does work. However, I think there's a better way to do it. And one of those better ways I thought to do it would be to manufacture a circuit board that would house those components, make it a little bit smaller form factor, and make it a little bit more secure and a lot cleaner inside the box in case anybody decided to open and look at it and see how to make one. And so today on the channel we're going to put one of these together, and I'll show you guys the components and what I do to manufacture these, and I can contrast it with the one that's available now, because I'm going to wind up selling these on my website, atoaudio.com, and I think they're going to be a better solution or better alternative to what's on eBay. So come on in closer and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here we have the probe that I purchased on eBay, and there's a couple differences on this probe considered to mine. And so my probe is much smaller package size. You can see the box is a lot smaller, and so that's one thing that's different. You can also see the leads he gives you are very short and thin wire. And so I made my leads several inches longer, and that really helps. When you're actually tuning an FM radio, guys, and you're having to hook stuff up, these short little leads are difficult to work with. And so just having them a couple inches longer makes a big difference on clamping onto the end of the antennas on the back of a receiver. The other big thing I did differently, guys, is you'll see that he gave you a BNC cable that comes right out of the box. Well, when you have the Sencore on your bench, and this has to go to the back of the receiver, and you also have your oscilloscope and everything else you need, this cable is just not long enough. It's really a stretch to get this plugged into the SG165 Sencore signal generator and then have these hooked up to the antenna. So what I did differently is I actually put a BNC connector here. So then that way you can basically pick your own BNC cable at the length that you want, connect it, and use it to connect to the Sencore SG165. And so those are a couple big differences that are small differences, but I think really make a much better product. And so that being a smaller package size, the case is smaller, the longer leads, and then having the option to be able to pick which cable you decide to use to connect to your Sencore. So now let's take a look at the inside components, and we'll compare them as well. And I'll show you what I was talking about when I open this up. So let me go ahead and open these up, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, so this is the inside of the other gentleman's probe that he's made. And as you can see, guys, it doesn't look pretty in here. So we've basically got the resistor here soldered, everything's exposed. We've used two capacitors, 247 microfarad capacitors to basically, when you put them together, it cuts them in half as far as capacitance to get as close as we can to the 20. So this is probably going to be testing it really at more like a 23 and a half, 24. So not the 20 that's needed in the circuit. And then you can see, basically, and I know it's hard to see, and I'm going to take a picture of this, but you can see the resistor and the capacitors, they're just kind of all wrapped together with each other and to try to make this circuit work. And so this does work, and so I'm not going to knock it. It does work. Like I said, I don't know about the longevity of this. It just doesn't look pretty to me. I think it could be done better. I can think it could be done in a more professional manner. And so that's why I decided to make my own. And so that's what that one looks like. So let me move that off to the side. And so now with mine, with the circuit board in, you can see it looks a lot more professional and a lot cleaner. And so I got the correct capacitor. It's a non-polar capacitor, and then the resistors, and everything just goes right onto the circuit board, and no mess. And so it looks a lot cleaner. Everything fits into this smaller package size, and so I think this is a much better option, a much cleaner option, and I think it's going to last the time, hopefully last for a long time. So, you know, I'm not knocking the other guy's work. It does work. I just think this is a better, I like this better. And maybe I'm biased because it's mine, but you know, I think the circuit board, if you're going to take the time to do this, why not do it right and make it look good? And so that's what I decided to do. And this was actually the first circuit board or circuit I've ever designed and had printed on a circuit board. So I'm actually pretty excited about that, because I'd never done that before. I had to teach myself a new skill, and by obviously no means am I an expert, but I think this is a bigger improvement. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on making one of these so you guys can see what's involved in the process. If you decide to buy one of these from me, what goes into it, and we'll go from there. All right, so the circuit itself is pretty simple. So even though I said I designed this circuit board here, that you guys can see, my first one, it wasn't like I was a rocket scientist or anything else like this. You know, the circuit is provided in the service manual, and I actually happen to have one of the original service manuals for the Sencore SG165. You guys know how crazy I am about finding an original service manual. I just love having the original. And so that's what I use to design this circuit. So you can find the circuit. So with that, that's what came into place for the circuit board. And so if I'm going to sell this in two ways. I'm going to sell just the circuit board itself with directions basically to what goes where. So that way you'll know that, hey, if I R1 is going to be a 1 meg resistor, R2 and R3 will be the 120 ohm resistors. And so that basically you could buy this, source your own components, and put it together yourself and save some money that way. And I'm probably going to sell these circuit boards for $8 or $10. And so if you decide to do that, you know, much cheaper alternative than doing it yourself if you just want the enjoyment of using this. The other way I'm going to sell this is going to be a completed kit. And so you'll get basically this whole product here already assembled and ready to go. So basically all you'll have to do is plug it in and it's ready to work. And so all the hard work will be done for you. But if you decide to buy just the circuit board, let's go ahead and let's talk about what we have to do to get it to work. And so I've got my leads here, got my box, got my capacitor, BNC connector, my ceramic capacitor, and then my resistors up here. So all we're going to do, guys, is just put these components on the circuit board, and then we'll solder everything. So like I said, if you buy the circuit board, it'll come with directions to what goes where. We're just going to slide the components into the circuit board. On the circuit board, it does have polarity for the capacitor, but you actually are going to want to use a non-polarized capacitor. That was a misnomer on my part when I designed this circuit board. I didn't design it that correctly. So, but not a big deal. Doesn't really matter. All right. So I actually did this originally on a breadboard before I designed this circuit, and I got super frustrated because it took so long to do this, and I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do this, because I really wanted to make one that looked nice. And so that's when I decided to make my own circuit board here and have them printed. And now you can put this thing together in like no time at all. And it's literally as simple as just putting the components on the board and soldering it, and then you've got a completed circuit. So it kind of really takes the brain work out of it, like double checking yourself, as long as you know where everything's going. So makes it a lot easier. Got one more resistor to add. And I'm using 1 watt resistors on this, which is probably overkill. You probably don't need to use that big of a resistor, but I had them, so I decided to use them. And just like that, guys, we've got all the components on the board already. And so you can see how easy that was to assemble. That took me, what, a couple minutes to do. And so now that's all that's left to do, and is hitting this up with some solder, and then we can connect it to our wiring. So let's just flip the board over. One thing I kind of wish I would have done a little bit different is these pads. You know, the newer circuit boards just don't have big pads. And so I kind of wish I'd have made the pads bigger. It doesn't matter, but I just think it would be nicer to have a bigger solder point. So we're just going to add our solder to each of these. And just take it once over at it. We'll go ahead and trim all our leads. And that one went flying. And I decided to leave this in real time so you guys could see how easy, if you decide to get this kit, how easy it is to put together. And we're done, guys. I mean, that's it. So the circuit board is all put together. And so now all that's left is to solder in these wires onto the board and then connect our B and C connector and put it in the box. So this is the box you'll get if you order from me. And I 3D designed this box and printed this box so it would exactly work for exactly what we want to do. And so it'll fit right in there. A couple things we want to do before we do that. So obviously we want to make sure these wires are through the hole before we solder them onto this board. If you're thinking no one would ever do that, well, guess what? I designed it and I did it the very first time, and then I had to unsolder it and then put it back in the box. So before we get started, let's go ahead and do that. So we need to go ahead and get these ready to take some solder. So I'm going to use my trusty sheathing tool here. Take off the insulation. I love this thing. I saw this on someone else's video a while back, I think, and I was like, man, I didn't even know that existed. I've got to get one. So we'll do these one at a time. I'm just going to kind of twist the wire. Then I'll put some flux on each one, and then I'll hit it with a little solder. So just get a little flux. This just makes it a lot easier for these to accept the solder. I always use my solder has flux in it, but I just find that it's a lot easier when I flux the. There's one. There's two. Get a little more solder. And there's 3. And you don't want to put too much solder on there at first because it does have to go through these holes. So if you look on the circuit board, and it's probably hard to see, but I do actually have them labeled. So it says black, green, and red. So pretty dummy proof. So all we're going to do is match it now. And so we'll do the black first. Remember to put it through the hole. We'll insert it into the board. And then we can hit it with some solder on the back side. So I've got some on my tip already. So that's that one. Next is green. So we'll go ahead and insert that into the box and then out the back. We'll put a little more solder on our tip here. All right, so the camera decided to stop on those last couple solder points. So basically, I just finished up the green and then also did the red, the same process. Then I trimmed them on the back, and you guys can see that this fits really nicely into the box. So now what we have to do is connect it to our BNC connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some short pieces of wire, and then I'm going to solder a wire onto the center pin and this outer pin. Now this center pin is where their signal's coming through, and this outer pin is our ground. So if we look on the board, you'll see S and G. So S standing for signal and G standing for ground. I don't know if that's the right way to do it. That's just how I did it. And so that way we could keep it dummy proof. So what I'm going to do is get, like I said, some short wire. I'll solder it to the BNC connector. I'll run the wires through the hole here and then solder them onto the board. Make sure you put your nut for the BNC connector on the wires before you solder it to the board, or else you're going to have to take it apart. Ask me how I know. Seems like I always make all the stupid mistakes first, and I do this so you guys don't have to. So let me go ahead and trim a few pieces of wire and we'll get started on that part. Okay, so I went ahead and got us a couple pieces of wire. I would recommend, if you buy this as a kit, don't make very short wires. Make this a little bit longer to make it easier to connect to this, and there's plenty of space in the box to put these wires. So the first thing we're going to do is solder the wires to the BNC connector itself. And so black is going to be for ground and red is going to be for our signal. So that means that the red's going to go to the center pin, and then black will go to this outer pin as well. So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and get some flux on both of those parts. So don't be stingy, put some flux on there. It'll make it a lot easier when you go to solder. And then what we're going to do is just get our solder ready, and then we're going to go ahead and get some solder on both of those components. So it's just easier to solder the wire onto it. So I got a little bead on that one and a little bead on there. And so this, as you heat up the component, the solder just flows onto it. So it just makes it a lot easier to put on there. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and I'm going to load a little more solder onto the tip of my thing here. There's a little hole in the BNC connector, so I'm just going to stick my wire through that hole. Like so. Well, this is when I need a third hand. Having a third hand would be nice, but you know what, if I had 3 hands, then I'd be telling you about how I needed a 4th hand. So we've got that on there. I'll go ahead and hit that with some solder. Boom. So that's done. And we can always, once we slide this in, we can move this pin out the way a little bit. But that's on there. So now we're ready to do our red wire to that center pin. Heat up the connector first, get that solder melted, then I'm just going to stick that wire right in there. And just like that, we're done. And so I'm going to trim that last little piece of wire at the back here. Now we have both of these wires complete, so I'm going to put them through the box here. Make sure to put your nut on. and then we can go ahead and solder them right onto the board. So red is going to go through the red hole, and we don't need a lot of solder, so I may even have some already on my tip. And if not, let me just add a little bit to it. Just hit that just for a second to get the solder on. That's connected. I'll do the same thing for my black or ground. I need to hit that with a little heat, soften that solder up. Got a little ball right on the end of it. It's not letting me go through the hole, so let me just cut that off. Now that should slide right through. There it is. And we'll do the same thing. Put a little solder on the tip of my Okay, so now all we have to do is put the board in. Slide the BCN connector through the hole. Now I would recommend just sliding it a little bit through and then starting to thread it. It's just easier to thread on. Tighten the nut, and we're done. And so in very real time, we've got a completed product here, and we're ready to go ahead and see if this works. So let me get a receiver and the Sencore SG165 back on the bench, and we'll test it out and see if we're getting a signal. Alright guys, so now I've got the Sencore SG165 hooked up, and the beauty of how I did it with the BNC connector on my probe is that I can just use my own cable. And so, you know, if I got a short cable, however long I need it to be able to set up my test equipment is what I can do. And so I've got the Sencore hooked up, the probe hooked up to the antenna jacks in the back, and I'll put a picture up on the screen to show you what that looks like. So very simple. Since we've got two places for the antenna, we'll use the balanced side, which is the red and the green cord. And then all we need to do now is turn on the unit. So let's go ahead and power it up. This unit I'm actually been working on is the Harman Kardon 730 twin. And so I've done a lot of work to this, and that video will be coming out as well. But one of the last things I'm going to be doing is a FM alignment on it, and I'll make a video about that, and I'll use my probe, and I'm going to use the SG165 to do that. So I've got the unit powered up. Let me go ahead and power up the signal generator. We'll go ahead and turn the volume up so y'all can hear it. So this is the static, and so I've got the dial on here at 95 megahertz FM, and so now I'm going to tune this. Now my probe that we just built together, guys, is working. We should hear a nice tone when we get there. So let's see. So there's the tone. If I come off of it, and you can tell as I get closer to it, the signal meter goes way up and the stereo light comes on. So this is working just the way we want it to work. No issues. So that just shows you guys how easy it is to make this probe and do it yourself. And so, like I said, I'm going to be selling these on the website. Let me go ahead and turn that down. I'll be selling the boards, circuit boards by themselves. So if you want to buy the circuit board and build it yourself, you can. Or if you want to buy a complete kit from me already assembled, you can do that as well. So if you guys have any questions on what I did in order to make that, please leave them down in the comments below. Again, I'll be doing a FM alignment on this stereo on a future video. So we'll be using that probe, and you guys can see and make sure that it works according to specs. So it's super easy, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, And hopefully, if you need one of these and you buy one of these SG165s and you're missing probes, now you know where you can get them at. So hopefully people will find this useful and they'll be able to get the probes for these units that are well made and like I said, I think is a superior quality. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.